Welcome to today's episode of the Normalized Surrogacy podcast by Surrogacy Mentor. I'm your host, Marielle Schuberth, three-time experienced gestational surrogate and intake manager for Surrogacy Mentor and Modern Parent Mentor, where our aim is a safe, ethical, and enjoyable surrogacy journey for all. Today, I'm excited to have two-time experienced GC Donnye with us. Welcome, Donnye. And today's topic is double embryo transfers. Today, we're going to discuss Donnye's experience with having two double embryo transfers and why now, as an industry professional, she feels that they're not safe for GC's bodies or international intended parents' pocketbooks, and really stress the importance of education in the community in surrogacy. So with all of that, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your family and what made you want to become a surrogate, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of everything else.
Well, hi, I'm Donnye. Yes, I am a two-time experienced gestational carrier. I've carried two sets of twins twice, which is why I have formed a very, very strong opinion on double embryo transfers. I got involved in surrogacy in 2015. I had just graduated beauty school. I felt like I wanted to do something more in the world rather than just do hair or just be a mom. I felt like I could do more and help more. So I started doing research. I looked into egg donation. I looked into surrogacy. Egg donation wasn't really my thing. And actually, I've noticed and I found speaking with egg donors and speaking with surrogates that those who do surrogacy don't do egg donation, and those who do egg donation don't do surrogacy. So it was just a big call for me. And the major thing is, I know everybody who's in our age range, we've seen Friends.
Yep.
And if you've seen Friends, then you know that Phoebe Buffay has been a surrogate for her brother and sister-in-law and carried triplets. So that was one of the biggest things that really left a mark in my brain, is like, she could do it. It's a beautiful thing to do. And when I was doing my research, I was like, my pregnancies were easy. I had two children of my own. My son was 2 years. How old was he? 3 years old? God, I'm old. I can't remember exactly how old he was. I believe he was 3 at the time. And I was like, that was really easy for me. Now, I'll firmly say, not a woman that's over here like, oh, pregnancy was awesome. I love doing it. Totally not my vibe. But in my head, I'm like, it was really easy for me. I could totally do this for somebody else to help them out, to help them become parents. So I spoke to my husband at the time, who is now my ex-husband, and he wasn't 100% on board. He was like, yeah, no, I don't think you should do that. And it took some convincing, some conversations. It's really hard when you have a partner who's not on board. There's a lot of times where you need to sit down and have full conversations, because it's very important that your partner is on board with you for the duration of your surrogacies.
Yep.
Once we sat down and talked, once he started seeing profiles with me, once he sat down and talked with the agency, and once he spoke with the therapist or the psychologist that we talked to, that's when he started feeling a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more understanding. So he was of great help during those times. His family, not so much. They were on the conservative side. His father actually didn't speak to me for a full 9 months. That was extremely fun.
Oh my, I guess at least if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Exactly.
I guess if we look at it that way.
I'll be honest, I didn't have the greatest support from that side. I did have a great support in my sisters. I have a twin sister myself. Should probably also mention that my ex-husband's a twin.
Oh, so you just have twin vibes all around. So
I should probably explain that. I thought it'd be cool. I'm like, oh, because I never thought of carrying twins. I was like, I'm going to help family. I was presented with a couple from the West Coast, a gay couple actually. And I'll be honest, working for a gay couple with a gay couple wasn't on my radar either. But I felt drawn to working with this couple.
Yeah.
And then they said they wanted twins. And I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. I'm a twin. He's a twin. Let's carry twins.
Yeah.
And the agency I was with, they just didn't talk to me much about it. They just were like, oh, yeah, that's great. Yeah, you should definitely do this. So I felt comfortable moving forward. I went and did the whole talking to the psychiatrist. I don't even remember that psychiatrist really talking to me about the implications of twins, what might happen.
Yeah.
So, and all in all, like that's what brought me in was just like the draw to help people. I know I just jumped forward. I
Oh
apologize.
no, you're okay. I know and that is the topic, but we always like to kind of figure out how we get there. And I do always like when I hear women talk about partners who are a little bit hesitant or maybe not fully on board. Did he verbalize kind of what his hesitations were and kind of how you were able to work through that? Because I know it is a common thing that a lot of
Oh, this
women
is
with male partners kind of are navigating through of maybe that could be helpful for other husbands to hear, other women to kind of like, well, if they're kind of struggling with this, just hearing XYZ.
well, okay, so it's a very interesting concept here. So he does come from a very conservative background, and in his mind, I would be doing something that just wasn't quite natural.
Yep.
Then him and I sat down and we discussed that it wasn't my genetics, that it was somebody else's genetics. Then he started being a little bit more open to it, but I'll be honest with you, when it came down to it for him and his side, what made him agree was the money behind it.
Yep.
So we have to be honest in this whole situation. It is
Yep.
okay to do this for money. It is okay.
Yep.
I came from a very, very poor background and I don't have a college education. And so that was another draw is I get to help somebody. And then I also get to better my own family with
Yep.
this.
Yep.
So
And we're big believers in that too, that it's okay. There should be no shame around compensation. Surrogacy income could and should help you reach your financial goals. It shouldn't be your only motivating factor. And when we talk about that, right, it should always add to kind of what you have coming in, but it absolutely could and should help. And to pretend that money isn't the big elephant in the room. It absolutely is. And it is okay for that to be a big factor. And I think the more we kind of can end that stigma, it's not the only reason why we do this. It is a huge undertaking, right? That you do as a GC. It's not this like easy thing that, oh, you're just in it for the money. Like we have done an episode where we kind of broke down the cost of like how much you make per hour if this is what you do it for. And trust me,
yeah.
nobody would be signing on for a job like that. But
If I
the money
remember correctly,
definitely.
the numbers are about $4 an hour if you
Yes.
monetize it. And at
Yes.
least that was like 10 years ago. God, what years? 9 years ago.
Yes.
I
And
sat
so,
down and broke it down. Yeah, not an uncommon thing. It's actually something that I sit down and when I was in your position as an intake coordinator, I would talk with the surrogates because I'm a very direct person. I'm very transparent about the process
yep.
based on my own experience
As
because
it
I
should be. Yep.
exactly. And one of the big things is talking with them about the aspect of what it can do for you and your family.
Hmm.
For me, I was able to open my own business. I opened my own salon. I ended up being a salon owner for 5 years, selling my salon and making an income from that. So it let me move forward in life in a direction that I would not have been able to without
Yep.
a college education. Now, mind you, I did put a lot of hard work, a lot of my own mental health, a lot of my own
Yeah.
intelligence in there. But without that push, without that financial help from surrogacy, I would not have been able to do any of that.
Yep.
To go back to the question about my ex-husband at the time, my partner, he also was against me working with a gay couple. Again,
Okay.
conservative background.
Yep.
And then he had a come to Jesus moment in his brain. And he actually came to me and he's like, I'm going to go ahead and just let you know I'm changing my mind on my stance because what it comes down to is these are people.
Yep.
So, and it doesn't necessarily matter in the end for what we're doing. So he
Yep.
changed his mind and we had that full conversation. It took a few days. It took a lot of conversations.
Yep.
But in the end, we did move forward in that direction.
Yeah, and it's great that you were able to have a partner who you were able to kind of constructively work through that with, because you do really need that support. And I love that he was able to kind of come through that. And I like how you also mentioned that during your psychological consultation that was a big turning point for him. We just recorded a podcast with mental health professional who does the screening, and she likes to refer to them as psychoeducational consultations, not just evaluations, because that's what it should be. We're educating. There's such an educational point to this. They're not just analyzing you, they're also educating you. And I love that we could tie that too, because you felt so much better after that kind of educational point from the psychological aspect of things as well. And so I love that that works.
Just the hilarious aspect of it is like we were sitting in that room. We had just done the whole evaluation, the consultation. I had to go out into a separate room and do the 300 plus questionnaire that you do.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and as I get out of doing that, he looks at me and he goes, "Yeah, I'm okay with working with gay guys." And I'm looking at him like, "Okay, you're being a little bit more verbal on this." And then he explains, he's like, "Yeah, I just watched a gay couple come in. They smelled real nice." And I'm sitting there going, okay, so good, great.
Yep.
And then we forward in that direction.
Yeah, and I found with so many of these extremely conservative people, if you're extremely religious, the way I always used to put it to them is, you know what, you may not agree with this, that's fine, but in the end, if you are that, stout in your beliefs, you also believe that you are not the judge here. And so what I do, you are not the one to judge me. It'll be taken care of elsewhere. And so you keep it moving, let us do our thing. And if it'll get sorted out in the end. So let us be happy now, and judgment will come later. It doesn't need to come from you.
Also, I would love to point out the fact that, us surrogates, we come from all walks of life. And some of that walk of life happens to be in areas where we're being around gay communities is not prevalent. You don't find that very often. So part of his stuff was the fact that he wasn't educated. He wasn't around gay couples. He wasn't around this community. He didn't understand it. Where I'm from originally, it's very, I wouldn't say rural. It's not rural, but it is an area where it is predominantly conservative. It was. Now it's growing into an area that's not. There's a lot more gay families there over the last 10 years. But at that time, there wasn't. So a lot of it has to do with lack of education and lack of exposure to what's going on.
Yep. No, and it makes perfect sense.
So one thing is that I started out feeling rather alone in my journey. I'm going to just start there. I was a part of an agency that was 4 hours away, which is not a bad thing because most agencies, it doesn't have to be local to you. I felt a really great connection with my intake coordinator, but then I was moved over to a coordinator that I just felt like a number. I didn't have a lot of information. Then I went to my medical screening, and I felt like I had a great connection with my coordinator with the clinic I was working with. And she educated me a little bit when it came down to twins. I still felt very comfortable. It wasn't until after my transfer that I was added to a community group for surrogates. So I missed out on a lot of things, I'll be honest. Like I didn't know what a POS was. I didn't know that most surrogates do pee on a stick. I didn't, and then have that moment with their intended parents. I went through that. I had my double embryo transfer, and it took right away. I knew immediately I was pregnant, probably like 5 days in, not just because of the symptoms. Like I came with extreme exhaustion. I came with nausea. I fell asleep in my shower, standing up in my shower around that time too. I was so, so tired. And yes, it is the medications, but carrying twins, man, like that exhausts your body beyond all belief. Then I went through my pregnancy and started, like, the weeks kept passing. I was developing a really great relationship with my intended fathers. They didn't live too far, like maybe they lived an hour plane ride away from me. So they were able to come to almost every single appointment.
Oh, wow, that's great.
I'm massively blessed. If it wasn't both, it was one. And then I had the opportunity to like make friends. And that was the big thing for me, is I didn't feel alone when our relationship started growing as friends. Then I went in and I started like going through just normal pregnancy stuff. I actually had a normal pregnancy with the twins the first time. It wasn't horrible. I did have a scare of cholestasis where I was starting to get itchy on my stomach and my arms, but then they did some tests and it wasn't cholestasis. I then actually got a growth under my eye, which turned out to be a hormonal growth. I
Oh
could
no.
I could see it, and it was just like so annoying, and like I don't know. It was just one of those situations where I was like, "What is on my face?"
Yeah. Oh
And
no.
it wouldn't have happened if I wasn't carrying twins. I should also mention that I worked as a hairstylist up until a week before they were born.
Oh my. Uh,
Yes.
Kudos to you, because I like needed help getting my shoes on. Like I couldn't imagine standing on
Well,
my feet doing hair for an entire twin pregnancy.
honestly, I've always been like a super go, 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 go kind of person,
Yep.
which later on became a realization of, oh my gosh, she has ADHD with a huge factor on the hyperactive, uh, which helped me, I'll be honest. I think that's what contributed for me being able to work that long time
Yep.
during that kind of pregnancy. But I will say, like, when it came to carrying twins, exhaustion was a thing. Way more exhaustion than with carrying a singleton. And when we got to the birth aspect, after we had found the growth on my face, we had it removed. And then a week later, went into labor at 35 weeks, 6 days. So around that time, I had gone in and my blood pressure was really high. My doctor was like, you're a day away from 36 weeks. It's okay. We are really worried about your blood pressure going any higher.
Yep.
You should probably come in. Called my intended fathers. They hopped on a plane immediately. Again, only an hour plane ride away. Not
Yep.
very. They arrived the night before. We had a 6 a.m. scheduled induction. So we get there the next day. Everything is beautiful. They're there. We're all laughing. And they start me on Pitocin. So me, I'm like sitting there. I know my body, as most of us surrogates do. We've
Yep.
been through this before. I know my body, and I know the epidural takes a while for that to kick in. So I'm over there just taking the pain because we also know Pitocin makes labor pains nice.
Hmm.
So as I'm laying there and the Pitocin is kicking in, I'm watching that there's the gauge that shows what the pain level, and I'm watching as it goes up and up, and I'm like, yep, this is fun, totally awesome, literally like making those faces. And one of the intended fathers, he was like, holy crap, as he's watching this thing go up past numbers, and he's like, how are you doing this? I'm like, yeah, I'd really like that epidural now. And I looked at the nurse, and mind you, this isn't less than an hour into getting that Pitocin. And I'm looking at the nurse and I'm like, hey, so can I get that epidural? It takes like a half an hour to an hour for it to actually work. Can we get this started? And she laughed and walked away. I'm like, awesome. Gonna
Yeah.
have gonna have an epidural. Let's see how, waiting, waiting, an hour passes. I'm like, what the hell? Meanwhile, the intended fathers are literally watching this gauge go up and the more pain. And I'm like, yeah, let's go.
Where's that doctor? Yeah.
And they were like just astounded by the fact that I was just literally not screaming. I'm like, yeah, let's do this thing. And they're like, how are you handling it? I'm like, honestly, this too shall pass, but boy, this MNF does not feel good. And they, I handle things with humor. So we're sitting there laughing. And then we finally turn to the nurse, hey, can we get that epidural? And they were actually great voices for me too, because they were like, hey, where's that epidural at?
That's great. Yeah.
And yeah, and the nurse was like, oh, I thought you were joking. And I'm like, what? Do I look like I'm joking?
What? Oh no.
So cut to about 15 minutes later, the anesthesiologist comes in. He inputs the epidural. I'm like, great. He's going through press this button here, press that button. I'm like, okay. And then my doctor walks in and he checks my cervix. He looks at me and he's like, did you just get the epidural? I'm like, uh-huh. He's like, that's not going to work for you now. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you're going to be giving birth in about 5 minutes.
Oh
And I'm
no.
like, what? So then we're wheeled into the OR. Mind you, it's been about 15 minutes since I've gotten that epidural. And we get into that OR, and we've got myself, my doctor, the intended fathers, my ex-husband, and we're there. And next thing I know, probably around 15, 20 minutes after I received that epidural, baby A came out. Practically walked out. He was 5 pounds, 11 ounces. Tiny little thing. And the funny thing is that one of my intended fathers had never seen a vagina before.
And that's quite a way to see it, you know?
Exactly. He was right at the end of that. But once that happened and once baby A came out, I'm exhausted at this point. I just spent an hour and a half or so in extreme pain. My body's going, oh my God, okay, one's out, one's out. And they're like, okay, let's push baby B. Let's push baby B, because he was slightly, I can't remember. I believe transverse is the word here. The doctor goes in just to turn him so he can come out. And the next thing I hear is, we need somebody to come hold this up. And I'm like, what's going on? And my doctor's like, okay, so baby B just kicked his cord out. We're going to have to do an emergency C-section. So sorry. This is what we would call a prolapse cord. So, hey, nurse. And he's yelling, nurse, come over here, hold the wall up. At one point I did have 2 arms in my vagina. Don't ask me how that worked.
Oh, it
Women's
hurts.
bodies are amazing. And then I hear, and again, I'm exhausted at this point. I hear my doctor, okay, so we're going to do this now. And I feel him pinching me. And I'm like so tired. I'm like thinking, okay, he's pinching me. Why is he pinching me? And the next thing I know, I feel cutting. And I'm like, I'm not supposed to feel that, am I? And he goes, what? Like,
Oh,
am I
no.
supposed to be able to feel you cutting right now? And he's like, somebody put her out now. Why is this epidural not working? And they're over there just emergency, like pressing this thing. They're going, put her to
Oh,
sleep
no.
now. And I'm like, what's going on? And so next thing I know, I'm waking up. I don't remember falling asleep. I'm waking up. My throat is sore. I'm just confused on what's going on. I can't feel the entire left side of my body. And the first thought I came to was, fuck, did I just have a stroke? Like I could not move my cheeks. I could not move my arm. I could not move the entire left side of my body. And I'm freaking out. And I
Yeah.
hear, we had to intubate you. You stopped breathing. So what
Oh,
ended up
my God.
happening is because that epidural didn't work in the timely manner, and kind of like how I told the nurse it was going to go down, I stopped breathing because it went up to my chest because I was laying flat.
Oh,
And so just to save baby B's life and to make sure everything was fine and to save my life, they intubated me. They did a massively quick emergency C-section. So quick, in fact, that when I looked over at one of my intended father's foot, he was covered in my blood. It had squirted all the way over to where he was standing. And I was like, oh, why do you have, oh, he has blood. And mind you, this is like all going on, confused Donnye state of like, what's going on and what's happening.
yeah.
Um, and then I was sent to recovery, and I was actually in recovery for 5 hours, and baby B was in NICU for 30 minutes. They
Wow.
were fine. They were beautiful. Baby B was 6 pounds, 3 ounces. Now, for twins, these are good sized twins. They were healthy. They were beautiful. The fathers had them immediately, and they went
Yeah.
over. So after that experience, they had the babies. I got to see them once. Somebody had actually told the intended fathers it's not good for me to hold the babies or see them very much because I might get attached and they might get attached. So you're probably going to start hearing why I've started joining the professional side on this end, because there's a lot of
Mhm.
misinformation that is passed not only to surrogates, but to intended parents themselves. So the fathers ended up leaving and going home. I stayed and did my recovery, which an emergency C-section is not an easy thing to heal from at
No.
all.
And I can't imagine doing that after one vaginal delivery. I had an emergency one with the twins, but they both came out that way most of the way. I had a footling come out, but most of the babies came out C-section, so I couldn't imagine the full double.
Well, for me, it was one of those "this too shall pass" kind of situation. So I
Yep.
got through it. It was painful. But after that experience, I realized that, this wasn't the way I wanted it to go. While we were friends, I didn't feel like we had connected on a point where I had actually had more expectations of being able to see them and, and do all of that. And I take full responsibility too on the fact that I was hormonal and distanced my own self at the end of that. But I made a decision that I wanted to do it again. I did not make a decision originally to do it for twins again. Was going to only do a singleton, and then I was actually going to break it up and do it for a straight couple, mainly because I wanted a fully different experience.
Yep.
I'm like, I want the full Phoebe experience. Come on. Cut to 2017, and I got a message on Facebook from a friend of mine from the East Coast. And she said, "Hey, I'd like to connect you to another friend of mine. Her boss and his husband are looking for looking into an option. They want children. They want to do surrogacy possibly, but they don't know anything." So I connected with them, sat with them, and talked to them for 3 hours.
Wow.
And they were, "Oh my God, we love you. Hey, would you be our surrogate?" And I was like, "No, sorry. I'm okay." And they were like, "But okay, but we can still be friends." I'm like, "Yeah, we can still be friends." It felt like a little, like when you turn somebody down for a date.
Yeah, you feel bad, but good for you.
But the agency I was working with was the same one I was before, and they kept presenting me with profiles that I just didn't feel connections with. And at one point, they sent me 3, and I felt completely overwhelmed with 3 profiles in front of me. And I was just like, I don't know what to do at this point. So I asked myself, why am I allowing them to choose somebody for me when I already found a couple that love me and I actually connected very well with?
Yeah.
So 2 weeks after we met, I said, "Hey, you guys, if I get approved for twins with the clinic that I was with, and you guys want to work with the agency that I'm with, I would love to be your surrogate."
So they had
And
told you in that first meeting that they wanted twins. Was that part of your initial hesitation? Yeah.
and I was like, in my back of my head going, they're not going to approve me for twins. So this might be one of those situations where, hey, we like each other enough that maybe they'll consider only doing 1 and I won't be approved for 2. But then I was approved for 2. And I was like, wait a second, why the hell was I just approved for 2? But okay, you know what? God in the universe has a plan here.
Yeah.
And I decided to move forward with that, built a really great relationship with them. They're on the East Coast and they wanted 2 girls. So I'd done 2 boys the time before. This was going to be different. It's 2 girls. Same experience with pregnancy. Got pregnant the first transfer. No issues at all. And the same symptoms. I had a subchorionic hemorrhage the first time and the second time, so I was very familiar with that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel as alone because I had actually started a community of surrogates in my area during my first pregnancy and afterwards, so that we would not feel alone. So it was doing great. We were having a great time, great relationship. Then I had gestational diabetes. Now, I'm going to tell you this right now. It is no joke not being able to eat regular food. And for a twin pregnancy, I only gained 5 pounds.
Wow.
And that's not a lot. So
No.
my experience there was I was always hungry. I was always nauseous. I was always going through these things. And I ended up delivering at 33 weeks, which is really, really early compared to the 30, almost 36 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
This time, scheduled C-section, amazing. By the way, I had the best anesthesiologist this time. I had a great experience with that delivery. I was up and walking 3 hours afterwards. Even if it was a C-section, I knew that my body needed to walk around.
Yep.
So then they came. Now they weren't there immediately because they were on the East Coast, so they couldn't come. So then that was me being that support for the babies when I could. My ex-husband, who was very, very supportive in that as well. And once they came, they were in the NICU for about a week and a half. I was asked to pump. Pumping is not easy, and I was not successful with that. Again, though, somebody had talked to them and given them misinformation on connecting with the baby. Somebody had told them, you shouldn't have her pump. You shouldn't have her holding the babies because that's going to cause a bond. They're going to think that she's the mom. And I don't know who gave them that information, but it's massive misinformation.
Yeah.
And it kind of hurt my feelings. It did. Did it ruin my relationship with them? No, it didn't. We still talk on occasion. I get to see pictures all the time. I speak with them. But that was one thing that was just like, who is giving these intended parents this information? Who's
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
surrogate want to develop that kind of relationship, that want a baby, who is telling them that having that skin to skin, which is needed for pumping,
Yeah.
who's telling him this stuff. And I think it was around that point that I realized I wanted to be a professional. I wanted to educate not only surrogates, but intended parents on the process. And so that's when I moved into being a professional.
Yeah, and I think that is so true because there is so much misinformation out there that it for everyone involved and it's so hard, and I'm sorry that it seems like both of your sets of dads were talking to the same person or on the same groups
Oh,
of wrong things.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think it's necessarily a thing that is just singular to them. I have been in this industry since 2018 as a professional, and
Mhm.
it is something that I have actually seen in a lot of intended parents.
Yeah.
And it's not professionals that are giving them this advice, it's actually their family members. It's also the nurses that they're working with in the hospitals. It's not something that we have control over, but as professionals, we should be able to educate them
Yeah.
afterwards, during their time, and let them know, hey, you're going to hear this from your family, you're going to hear this from a doctor, but just keep in mind, you are not, or they're not involved in this part. They don't understand this part.
Yep.
This is probably what's going on. This is what's going to happen.
Yep. And it's education is so important. That's what we strive for in getting those all that information out there. And so with your gestational diabetes, obviously you couldn't eat what you wanted during the twin pregnancy. Did you have
Not what you
to manage
want.
with medication, or were you able to manage with diet?
It was diet, but it was also with metformin.
Okay.
So with that
And that's not
gestation,
an easy one to deal with either, is it?
no, but I should also tell you, it's not just not being able to eat what you want. It's more of the fact that you have to limit your carb intake. And there's a lot of things that have carbs in them. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have fruit. I would eat one piece of fruit. And if you've ever had alcohol or some kind of inebriating substance, that's what it felt like to me when I had one slice of mango. It was a massive brain fog. It was a lot of exhaustion, a lot of eating protein that just my body wasn't a fan of. I'm
Mm-hmm.
somebody who normally eats a bunch of protein. I'm a fruits, vegetables kind of person. So it was a massive change for me. Plus, mentally, it can kind of work on you. You know, you're sitting there, you're hungry all the time, you're having to eat cheese, and you're supposed to limit how many carbs you're taking. 150 grams is what I was limited to per day. And you have to look there. I remember vividly, like learning how to like watch every label I was of food I was eating, to the point where my son at that time, he was, I think, around 5 years old at that time. He was like looking and learning with me.
Yep.
And he was like, Mom, this has too many carbs. You can't have this, you can't have that. And so like it limited a lot of things that I could do in public, like eating wise.
Mm-hmm.
Mentally, it made me grumpy a lot, and hormonally, you add all of that together. So
Yep.
I don't wish gestational diabetes on anyone.
Yep. And that's definitely with twins, it definitely can increase your chances of gestational diabetes among a lot of the other risks that are associated with a twin pregnancy.
The risks of preeclampsia are higher. Gestational
Mhm.
diabetes is higher. You've got cholestasis, which is higher. There's a lot of risks behind it. Not only are there possible risks of having of giving birth earlier and then also putting your body through that trauma, there's also repercussions afterwards. And so I'll get to another aspect that I had is about a year and a half after my last surrogacy, I had to have a hysterectomy. Um, one of the emergency C-sections, we don't know which one. I'm pretty sure it was the first one, but one of the C-sections made it so that my uterus adhered to my abdominal wall. And during that time, I was having issues with pain, very similar to the pain that you would feel in endometriosis.
Ooh.
So, yes, and that was 4 years of my life. I didn't realize how much pain I was in until after I had my hysterectomy. And I'm going to just express this here. I was 30 years old. I was never told that my own reproductive abilities might go away. So here I am at 30 years old, looking at my body going, I need a hysterectomy. Okay, how do I go about this? I go and talk with my doctor who had told me all this news, and he says, okay, we're gonna go ahead and schedule this. You do need it. And then I had the insurance company fight back. You're only 30. You can't have a hysterectomy. Yes.
Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah.
It literally took my male doctor to write a note that said she has had 6 children. She
We're
needs,
good.
we're good. Now, I can't say 100% that at that time I was complete with having my own children, but I was also
Mhm.
at that time at 30, I was going through a divorce with my ex-husband. I was initially trying to get my tubes tied, which was a reversible thing if I hadn't met somebody in the future and wanted to have children with them.
Yep.
However, the hysterectomy took that capability from me, which has left the last 5 years of my life as I've been dating and meeting partners. It's limited
Hmm.
with partners I can have because there are people who want children.
Yep.
Uh, so now I'm in a position where either if I want to have children with my partner, who I'm currently with right now, who has no children of his own, if we want to have that aspect, the only option for us is surrogacy and
The
adoption.
irony there.
Irony there, yes. The whole 100 and what it's the 360 of everything.
Hmm.
So for me, there's a lot of education that needs to be done. And I personally have sat down with surrogates who have been like, yes, I want to do a double embryo transfer. I can carry twins. And I'm like, okay, I understand and I respect your thought here. But let's talk for a second about the possibilities in the future. Let's talk about the fact that you might not have a uterus after. What are
Yep.
your plans? What are your thoughts here? Here's the things that could happen. And I do always share my personal story
Yep.
because without that, as a surrogate, we can't help others without having our experiences. So all of that combined has given me the opportunity to learn and has given me the opportunity to grow into the professional side of things, being able to talk to surrogates, intended parents about what it's like to carry twins, what it's like to go through all of that, the positives and the negatives. Because if you can't
Yep.
talk about the positive and the negatives, then you're not being truthful and factual about the events.
Yep. Because that's the thing. You got to have full disclosure for the good and the bad for somebody to be able to make an informed decision because glossing over the bad, that's not fair. You need to be
Exactly.
able to go into it knowing all the facts and then being able to make that decision because it's just not fair. And yeah, we don't want to harp on the negatives and scare women out of it, but you need to know that yes, it is rare. It doesn't always happen, but it's possible. And you need to go into that knowing it's
I,
possible and
I
being
have
fully
to actually
informed.
say to you, I don't believe it's rare. I actually believe it is more common than people realize. Mainly, again, because I've been in this industry for a while now, and I've seen and I've met so many women that have either had hysterectomies, they've had some complications in the end. So no, I don't believe it's rare, and I think it's actually more prevalent in doing surrogacy. And I think women need to understand that. I don't think it should be 100% of a deterrent. I think
Hmm.
that every surrogate should be done and complete with their family and sure of that by the time that they are moving forward.
Yep.
Uh, but I really just think that it's not a rare thing at all.
Yeah. And I think, you're right. And I think the less people talk about it, the more we don't know. Right. And I think that this kind of comes with full circle with that is you're right. Maybe it's not rare, but if we don't talk about it, we don't know.
Exactly.
That's a whole other thing too of just let's air this out. Let's get it on the table so that way women can have informed consent. And you can't have informed consent without all the information. And I think that is the biggest thing. Whether it's a double embryo transfer or even a single embryo transfer, with pregnancy comes risk, period. Whether it is a surrogacy or your own, or whether it's twins or single or whatever, it does come with risk. And I know, even before you go in for your transfer, you sign all this paperwork and yes, you're supposed to read the fine print, but like in those moments when you're kind of doing all of this, are you really reading and comprehending that? Probably
Exactly.
not. In my last C-section, we didn't discuss kind of what happens before you're in a C-section, and I feel in my case personally, had I understood what would have happened had I needed a hysterectomy prior to being in the middle of a dangerous situation. I may have made different choices. And I feel like those maybe are conversations you need to have before you're put in a high stress situation and having to make those decisions while you're bleeding on an operating table. Those types of things just in surrogacy in general too. Oh, well, this one didn't thaw well, so we're going to transfer two. What do you think? And they ask you like in the moment and you're like, well, I guess, or like these things need to be discussed a lot of times beforehand so that you're not kind of signing a paper that you're expected to read and digest in those moments or things like that. Just really understanding everything beforehand, I think is.
I agree. And I have to say, like, I don't blame all the professionals that have been involved, nor do I blame anyone in general when it comes down to that, because I am my own person. I could have taken the time to read those things, to research by myself. But when you take a step back and you look at the majority of women who do surrogacy and you look at why they're doing it, there's a lot of thought process that goes into that. You aren't going to, you can't expect that person to have the knowledge to sit there and read every little line and understand every single line of what everything means.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I've learned throughout my growth process in this industry is just, taking that time is important. So because I felt like I wasn't taught to do these things, that's why I prefer to teach others.
Yep. You don't know what you don't know, and that's the hardest part is it's kind of a trial by fire, and that's why it's so important for professionals in our industry to really hold ourselves to a higher standard and self-regulate and self-govern for things like this. And that's why seeds and organizations like this are so important because we all need to hold ourselves to higher ethical standards, and ethics and surrogacy comes down to transparency for everyone. And we all need to do better about educating women on the process and intended parents because you don't know what you don't know until you're in the thick of it. But as professionals, we do, whether we've learned it the hard way or not, everybody else doesn't have to. And I think coming together as, a group, we can do that and we can make change. And we really are starting to see a lot more of that in the industry. And I think it's wonderful.
I have to say, I have seen such growth in this industry since I've been involved and just watching it evolve. I've seen so many more people wanting that transparency. Companies and businesses like you, offering the opportunity for surrogates to learn while they're trying to choose an agency. Other companies that I've been involved with and around helping intended parents do the same thing so that they know, sitting down with them and talking with intended parents about the risks of having twins if they're international intended parents, the insurance complications, the money that they would have to spend on not on NICU costs, the possibility of NICU, which is really high. It's a very, very high cost, and it's more likely to happen with twins. So I'm actually quite proud of the professionals in our industry now. I'm watching them as they're all starting to become more transparent when it comes to education, wanting to give that education, sitting down and trying to learn the times. And that's actually what I've had blessings to do. I've been blessed to be able to help agencies come up with these education. I've been blessed to be able to sit down and talk with intended parents and give them my experience, talk with them and say, hey, you're from this country, it's going to cost around $450,000 for twins in the NICU minimum. I've seen higher bills than that. And you don't want to put yourself in that situation. I'm also seeing people, members of SEEDS, having these same conversations with these intended parents, saying DETs are not safe for not just the surrogates, but for the intended parents' pocketbooks. So it's great to see everybody starting to grow as the industry grows as well.
Yeah, and I think it's so important. And I love that I get to talk to women who have experienced this, who are willing to help share their stories so we can get that out there. Because sometimes, if it's coming from a professional and a doctor, sometimes women's eyes kind of glaze over like, yeah, okay, I get it. Because it's all these big words and it's not personal experiences. And that's what I love, being able to talk to women who have experienced it, who have personally done it, who can give that personal perspective, because I think it makes it a lot easier to understand and digest, and it makes it tangible and real versus some statistic that a doctor is giving you. Well, statistically, this number of but like when you hear somebody's story and you're like, okay, wow, yeah, I need to pay attention to this. This is something I should look into. This is something I should ask. It definitely makes it easier to kind of swallow and digest when it comes from a personal perspective. And so I love that. And I appreciate your being willing to share all the things.
I add though is like I find that if you have surrogates talking to another surrogate, they can get on their level, explain things in a manner that they're going to understand. I personally, none of the coordinators I had were experienced in surrogacy.
Yep.
They knew the process, but they'd never gone through it before.
Yep.
But I love seeing other surrogates become professionals so that they can sit down and be on that level, that talk one-on-one as a sister rather than somebody who is coordinating. It's more of like a helpful community of, hey, girl, this is what we're doing. This is what's going to happen. Like, let's watch you, but also let's help them. Let's do this together. And that's what I love about companies that have surrogates as employees, as coordinators, as intake managers, because that gives a little bit extra.
Yep, because we really understand all the things for sure. For sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing everything. That brings us to the end of this episode of the Normalized Surrogacy podcast by Surrogacy Mentor. I want to thank our very special guest, Donnye, for joining us for this chat today. Be sure to check us out online at surrogacymentor.com and modernparentmentor.com if you're interested in knowing whether surrogacy is right for you, and take our 2-minute easy quiz on our website if you're interested in becoming a surrogate. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast to learn more about gestational surrogacy and how to have a safe, ethical, and enjoyable surrogacy journey. Talk to you next time.